Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Sounds good. Hope it stays that way. Yep.
There's a yellow rose in Texas that I am going to see. No other fellow knows her, no other, only me. She cried so when I left her, it like to broke my heart. And if I ever find her, we never more will part. Hey! Hey! Next round's on me, boys. She's the sweetest rose of color this soldier ever knew. Her eyes are bright as diamonds, they sparkle like the dew. You may talk about your dearest maid, sing of Rosalie, but the yellow rose of Texas is the only girl for me.
Sounds good.
Where the Rio Grande is flowing and the starry skies are bright, she walks along the river in the quiet summer night. She thinks if I remember when we parted long ago, I promise to come back again.
Qing, yeah. It's about as close as you need to be. And the trouble with these Chinese names is technically you need like the tones, and well, unless you're a Chinese speaker or you've had a lot of practice, getting those tones right is really, really hard.
Put myself on camera. What's up, guys? Welcome to Kaiserreich Cinema Year 2. This is our first World of Kaiserreich release of the season. I'm very excited. World of Kaiserreich Qing Empire. So we are moving away from North America, away from Europe for a while. We want to spend some time in China and in Asia in general. Today I have a special guest with me. As you guys know, this is a new live stream. This is Kaiserreich Café. Basically, our plan was to do some shorter live streams whenever we release a World of Kaiserreich video. So I was thinking we invite a developer from the region we are presenting in that particular video, and we just have a 20-minute chat about their plans for the region. So I have Gabriel Flamefang with me. Gabriel. Ooh, actually I should get like one of those laugh tracks. Wait, I'm gonna pull up like just give me a second, guys. This is all professional. Audience cheer on YouTube. Okay, I got it. Yeah, there we go. Everyone is now getting this horribly mixed, like very low resolution. I think that's probably incredibly loud. Alright guys, I think it's time for the World of Kaiserreich channel. So Premiere will begin shortly, so if everyone wants to join in, Gabriel, can you do me a solid and post the links to our live stream on the Kaiserreich and Paradox Plaza Discord, because I've got like 4 screens open and yeah, they can. I have the same thing. Like I need a new chair. Whenever I can move around in my chair, it's like. Very sorry for that, guys. We're working on a new office. This is a low budget operation. You know, I actually forgot posting in the Kaiserreich Cinema Discord, which is probably join us for the premiere of the WoK Qing Empire. This is just a live stream was furiously mashing keys. Long live the mandates. Boom. And then a link to our live stream. Flamefang. I think that's everything. So we have this new thing now. It's called Social Pilot, Gabriel. It basically allows you to schedule posts. It's very handy because we've been growing across platforms. We're on Facebook as well now. Someone is sending me. Oh yeah, that's yours. You're sending it out on our Kaiserreich. Well, I'm okay. I'm okay with the live streams being a little like rough around the edges. I mean, that's I think the charm of being live. You know, it's like it's just me in my room, right? You just put the camera on. Actually, it's still full camera. Well, oh, sorry guys, I wasn't totally paying attention to the camera.
The aftermath of the Shanghai Rebellion saw China consumed by nearly 2 decades of chaos and civil war. The warlords.
What do you mean exactly? In the same.
Unending, the violence unquenchable.
I am for some reason my video is quite behind, so
seem to be turned upside down and torn apart.
Yeah.
It is from this crucible of civil war that Wu Peifu, the Jade Marshal, stepped forth into the limelight. After throwing back the northern expedition at Wuhan and crushing Zhang Zuling's Fengtan army twice at the Shanhai Pass, Wu was able to bring the whole of China proper under a single banner.
Right.
Crucial aid had come.
Yeah, so I was involved writing the script and coming up with sort of some of the concept of the art itself. I provided our artist with basically a general description of what the characters should look like, what weapons they should probably have. Of course, the actual image and the composition and everything is really his. As for the script, though, really the challenge was trying to make the faction interesting on the basis that it's, this is the Qing Empire, which everybody's kind of familiar with in a way, but also making it clear that this is a little bit different. After all, this is Kaiserreich. It's not, 1912, it's 1936, and the Qing are still around. So trying to make clear that this is sort of a Manchu empire, but it's also very much a sort of Han Chinese warlord-dominated empire, and trying to weave those two narratives together in a way that kind of makes sense. Because there's a lot of sort of complexity and nuance in how the Qing Empire is run and how China is run that's a little bit difficult to get across, in a purely sort of visual medium. You see the image, you see the soldiers and everything, but you don't necessarily know what they stand for besides the flags they're carrying. So hopefully the script will sort of get that across and make it interesting.
The empire's military backbone. The Legislative Assembly, a carryover from the old regime, exercises little power.
Oh, well, I was pretty much, concluding that idea.
Wu's military strength before anything else is the decisive factor in Beijing politics. However, through the rest of China, an old proverb still rings true. The mountains are high, and the emperor is far away. Shanggao Huangdi Yan. In the east, along the banks of the lower Yangtze, Wu's former protege, Song Changfeng, the Smiling Tiger, built his strength and plots against his former master. In the southern coastal cities, and deep in the mountains of Fujian, an old enemy still lies in wait. Kuomintang agitators slowly spread from town to city, speaking of a new revolution. To the north, on the Manchurian frontier, Zhang Zuolin's Fengtang government continues to rally its forces for reconquest, watching and waiting. The Qing government's authority is everywhere contested and diffuse. Meanwhile, across the Yellow Sea, the rising sun looms.
Yeah, I think it came together really well.
Once close relations with Germany have gradually soured. With the country divided and the central government limited to the North China Plain, will the country again fall into chaos? Will it again become little more than a pawn in the hands of cruel and uncaring foreign powers? Or could this danger instead become an opportunity? Could the empire again receive heaven's mandate?
Yeah, sorry guys, can you hear me now? It'll take about 40 seconds for them to catch up with us. But apparently my mic was muted. Can you hear us now? If you hear Flamefang,
Cinema needs you. Back the attack.
let's see if
Or dash over to our alt history website.
no, it'll take about 40 seconds for them to. Yeah, normally we should have audio now.
Welcome to Sierra Tango, Mitchell McDonald.
Alright guys, just a request of audio. What I'm gonna do is run past all these scenes in OBS Streamlab and see if the audio functions well. But the problem is that I tend to switch up mixes a few times, and then now we're on this Discord call, so I need to mix that in. And so things get broken. So basically, Gabriel, we just had a 10-minute conversation and we didn't get any of that. So, well, basically I have to start over. And I think the part where people stop playing is the part where I switch scenes. So basically what I was saying, guys, for those asking what's the music is the Qing Empire team, the Mandates Eternal, or known by its official name as, you can find it on our channel, known by its official name as Skilled in the Arts by Yi Namtiro. So this is the song is really loud. It's weird, it's on a tree on my screen. How's the music now, guys? Okay, let's take it down to 2. This is about as low as I can do the audio mix. Anyway, welcome to all live streamers. So basically, Gabriel, we were talking. What's interesting about this World of Kaiserreich that we just saw is it's the first one that was neither written nor illustrated by me. So you actually wrote the script for this one. So can you go over that entire explanation again? Because we had a 10-minute conversation and nothing got recorded.
Yeah. So the script was written by me, and in writing it, the main sort of challenge was trying to get across the nuance that's kind of present in the Qing Empire and in a lot of China as well. Because at the end of the day, the image can only communicate so much. A lot has to come through the script. And the Qing Empire is a bit different in Kaiserreich from what a lot of people would, instantly associate with the name. When you go and look it up, you see this thing that fell apart in 1910, 1912. But that's not really what is actually still exists in 1936 in Kaiserreich. It's actually a technically Manchu, but really Han Chinese warlord-run empire. The actual government that's controlling it is by and large the I'm going to mispronounce this Zhili clique.
While we do this display, do you mind if I Photoshop you into the Qing Empire piece? I just had this idea.
Go ahead.
It actually fits really well. I'm gonna.
Oh man, perfect.
This is wonderful. This is quality content, guys. Yeah, please continue. So you wrote the entire script.
That's right. Yeah. So I was trying to get across this kind of nuance of how you have these two kind of narratives of the sort of Manchu, the Qing, everything people associate with the Qing Empire and the flag, but also the actual sort of history of it being controlled more by this set of warlords, in particular Wu Peifu, who is kind of the head warlord, the head honcho in the Qing Empire, even though he doesn't actually show his face as much.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the process of making this, the image was done by a really great artist whose name Vincent will have to fill in because I've blanked on it.
The Swedish illustration master Nicholas Lenman was our contractor for this particular piece.
That's right. And so I sent sort of a briefing to him of what sort of I wanted to see in the image, something for him to work from. I actually sent the image to Vincent if he wants to pull it up. That's up to him. But
if you just give me a minute, Flame, I'm going to. People say you are loud compared to me, so I'm going to try and just take you down a notch and take the music up. Alright, so give me 10 seconds until the stream catches up, and then I'm gonna listen for myself on the stream. I'm gonna mute this for 5 seconds while I check the audio. Because it's weird, we're using the same settings as we did during our last talk, yet now people seem to be hearing things differently.
Okay.
So I'm just playing around with settings. Yeah, you got a briefing. I was actually looking for this briefing as well, I probably still have it. So this is the original briefing sent to Nicholas, and I think you guys probably won't be able to read it because we're only broadcasting at 1080p. In the meanwhile, guys, for those asking for the Qing Empire wallpaper, I will upload those in the coming week. I'll also put in art prints on the web shop, like that's all stuff that's on my to-do list, so probably get those on Monday. Yeah, I have the briefing open right now, Flame.
I've also posted it in the chat, so if somebody wants to pull it up and take a look at it that way.
Actually, I can also post it in our live chat if people want to.
But basically, the idea of this was to give kind of a sort of visual dictionary for the artist, so that he could pull and take things from this.
Mm-hmm.
But also on the left side, you notice all that text, and so I kind of tried to encapsulate everything that's sort of key or most noticeable about the Qing in that section.
Mm-hmm.
Things that'll make them stand out from the others. And as we go forward with some more China videos, I made similar briefings, and I've tried to kind of narrow them down to this kind of set of visual things that'll make them stand out. Because if you go back and look at actual historical China, first off, a lot of the uniforms were pretty simple. You had a lot of guys in almost civilian clothing running around, but also because things were so non-standardized, there wasn't really a sort of key look for any particular army. The closest you had to that was like there was one warlord I remember that had I think it was Sun Chuanfang, had basically the big hats, as they were called, which made his troops stand out, and that was about it. Otherwise, it was largely just armbands. So hopefully, we've done a good enough job making these guys look really distinct and kind of embodying the character of the faction they represent.
I think it's a great look for Qing, especially sort of the colorful nature of the piece. and combined with that sort of really old German weaponry, the random mix of actual military stuff and what is basically Paris dress. The bright blue colors, which were never a good idea in any military situation ever. But yeah, I think it's a great look. I'm very glad with how all China pieces come out, because we have what's the next one you're working on, Gabriel?
Feng Tian or Feng Tian,
Feng Tian.
more accurately, I think.
So we have
which people
Feng Tian.
seem to misspell it pretty much every single time I see it read or
Yeah,
written. Sorry.
It's
So
I mean, a lot of these factions I misspell very occasionally. Like the only thing I know I can spell consistently is Qing, because it has the Q. It's like not something you'll easily forget.
right.
But yeah, I'm really happy with the way this art turned out. So we will be putting wallpapers as well as art prints online in the coming week. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, guys. It's been a crazy week. I've been doing some work on Chomsky, which is our project to do a full documentary series, like History Channel style, on the Kaiserreich timeline, 1918-1936. Now to bring it back to you, Flame, I need to pull up the questions we had in here. This is a live stream. Here we go. So, Gabriel, can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into Kaiserreich in the first place, and like and then afterwards how you got into the China as a China developer specifically?
Sure. So I guess you could say that I got into Kaiserreich through just sort of general. Well, basically, I came across the setting a number of times, mainly through something called AARs, or After Action Reports, which don't seem to be quite as common these days, but were very, very common back with Hearts of Iron 2 and especially Darkest Hour. These things were around on forums back when people used forums a lot, and I would come across them, give them a read, find them really interesting, and after a while I discovered there was something more cohesive behind all these, and an actual setting. And so basically back in sort of late 2016, toward the end of summer I think it was, I had submitted my dissertation for my master's degree, and I was kind of sitting around waiting for those results to come in and all that kind of stuff, and I saw that, hey, Kaiserreich has been released for Hearts of Iron 4. Maybe I'll go and look into that. And so I signed up on the forums and then got no response for like 6 months. Actually, not quite 6 months.
Forums
a bit less than that.
Like the forums, like we have regulars still visiting the forums, but I should say I'm probably like from the old guard who visit the forums regularly, and even I don't visit the forums more than once a month, once every 2 months nowadays. Like I was big into art writing. I was on Paradox Plaza every day. Now the Reddit seems to have taken like that space. I think it's just because of ease of use.
Yeah, it's just way more active. So it was basically in very late 2016, early 2017 that I actually joined the team, back when it was in quite a bit of flux, and then sort of just worked my way up through working on different things. I was interested in working on Feng Tian at first as part of the larger China rework, and then, as I've mentioned a couple times, including at my talk at PDXCon, well, the China team kind of disappeared. The last two people that had been working on it, there was sort of a big disagreement. They left, and I was kind of left with this whole massive project just kind of sitting there, which I was kind of expected to just kind of take on because, well, I was the only person doing anything in China at all.
I do remember like the beginning stage of China after the relaunch being a very tough one.
It was, yeah, because the way Kaiserreich was developed back in the Darkest Hour and Hearts of Iron 2 days was very different from how we do it now. We're much closer to a sort of professional team. But back then, people were on the forums. They'd come up with some idea. They'd usually post about it saying, hey, what if we added this idea to the game? The devs would say, hey, that sounds like a good idea, or not. And if it did, well, some guy, basically, whoever suggested it, would go and code up whatever they wanted to add. And then they would actually zip up the file, send it to the devs, and then they would put it into the next release.
Yeah, this was even before Git was a thing.
Yeah, so the code was extremely non-standard. It wasn't always clear how things fit together. It was just generally very messy. And then also there were just storyline, narrative, and historical problems with it. Some of it was arguably kind of insulting to Chinese people because it took Chinese history and kind of stereotyped a lot of it.
Yeah.
So the aim was to try and change that with the China rework. To get on to your next question, though, about what got me into Chinese history at all, well, actually, Japanese history. I wrote my undergrad thesis on Japanese imperialism and colonialism. And, well, naturally, that tied a lot into China. The more I read about it, the more interesting it seemed.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, yeah, I just, picked up a lot of different books about it, read more about it, found it interesting, and Kaiserreich gave a way for me to turn that into something.
I think your academic background does show in sort of the level of detail and care that the even minor factions in China, like I would say 9 out of 10 factions in the current China rework that I just have never heard of.
Yeah, I mean, China does have a way of being very obscure in this period for a whole variety of reasons, some of which I sort of mentioned in the PDXCon talk. So anybody who hasn't seen that can maybe
Actually,
go
I
and
can
have a
pull
look.
up your slide if you want to. I think you had a really good slide on this that where you talk about sort of how the distances in China dictated the warlord era. So
Yeah.
what I have up right now is the unification paths and their possible supporters. I think a little further on, we discuss the actual size of China. Yeah, here you go. Size and scale. So it took 21 days to travel from the far west of China to Beijing. 21 days, or 7 days from north to south. So let's say Shandong to up until the Russian border, basically.
Yeah.
And
And that's good estimations. That's everything going well.
Yeah. Okay. So the logistical issues of that were obviously ridiculous. So we get the situation. I think Kaiserreich, it's sort of, I love how it mirrors the real situation, like the our timeline situation where the nationalists only basically control the Yellow River Delta and the heartland of China, and they've been replaced by the Qing in the 7 provinces. Sorry, the League of Provinces.
League of 8 provinces.
Yeah. And then you get all these factions. I've got this. I've got the sheet open with all the starting territories and the factions that can rise up, and it's just ridiculous.
And that does, in a large way, mirror the way that China was during the warlord period. A lot of people come out and say, "Oh, Kaiserreich likes having all of its civil wars." Well, China had a lot of civil wars in this period historically. Even if you're looking at the actual period of World War II, sort of the 1930s, early 1940s in China, these warlords were still around. Not everywhere, but the whole early period of the war where the Japanese were sweeping across the North China Plain, those were warlord armies they were fighting. Some of the powerful KMT generals, Li Zongren, for instance, he was basically a very powerful warlord. So a lot of this does mirror, in many ways, the real history. In a way, the warlord era could have continued, albeit it's also, of course, matched up to Kaiserreich's history of the Germans winning the First World War.
Yeah, obviously the German influence in China is very defining as to how China's lore develops 1918 through 1936. Can you talk a little bit more about what your plans were for Germany specifically in this area? So we saw basically the end of the old AOG, and what we got is the League of 8 Provinces with a basically more subtle way of German influence.
Yeah, so one thing to very quickly note is that a lot of the underpinnings of the China rework were actually set down before I myself became involved. So I can't necessarily tell you what they were thinking when they set out, say, there's going to be a League of 8 Provinces.
Yeah.
Besides that, it is based in some real history, and there are reasons for it that I later kind of pieced together and explained. Like, a lot of this stuff was almost like backwards reverse justified by me in a sense.
Yeah.
Like I got to see, here's this League of 8 Provinces. How do I make it work within, the Kaiserreich setting?
Well, I mean, we do a lot of that with legacy lore as well. Like we do a lot of writing just to make the Second American Civil War work, because it just works so well as a lore point and as well gameplay. But I think, I don't know this because we don't know who first came up with the idea of a Second American Civil War, but I think the original reason, and I think as well for a lot of the base China, like China powers you got to work around with is gameplay reasons, right? There's not a real extreme power block in Kaiserreich that can tilt the game either way. So if we chop everyone into equal little bits and then let the AI fight it out, you get this very interesting. Basically, the style of game Kaiserreich provides is where you really never know how the world's gonna turn out, because all these wars can go like they can go left, right, up, down.
Exactly. And actually, with China, that's been a little bit of a problem in that there's so many different ways it can turn out that it means that for each potential victor in each potential conflict, we have to account for that
So
in the code in some way.
Gabriel, Electric Angel asks, why did the AOG get a dev diary back before the updates when they got dropped in the end? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that we weren't actually considering getting rid of the AOG until we tried to implement it in the code.
Okay.
So basically, this was a case where the theory didn't really match up to the reality. But also, there was the fact that the AOG had gone through, by that point, I think, 3 or 4 separate developers who hadn't gone especially far with it. And this was a general problem with the China rework, where people were off working on their own parts of Kaiserreich. But being like a 20 tag thing, we needed more people to fill in all of these tags in China. So we pulled in new people.
Mm-hmm.
But the unfortunate problem is that somebody that's new to the project will have an especially hard time getting their hands on, or getting a real grip on, something as in-depth and complicated as China. So there was a very high attrition rate with the China rework, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So the AOG came to this point where it was like, well, we could try to push it in, we could try to implement it in the game, but it seems like it's not going to match up very well on a practical level, because Hearts of Iron 4 just doesn't accommodate that kind of tag very well. The idea was basically for it to be like a puppet master kind of tag. But Hoi 4 just doesn't do that very well. We had to actually add territory to the AOG so that it could have enough manpower to form enough divisions to protect itself. But then also, we would have had to find another person that might or might not end up making the AOG actually work.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that'd be slowing everybody else down, basically. So we decided it's best to cut our losses here, just integrate this stuff with the LEP and GEA, and I think it was a decision for the best.
Yeah. So I'm getting a note from someone that we're a little quiet. I'm just gonna mute my audio for 5 seconds. You guys are gonna hear this because I need to. Actually, I cannot mute the audio because then I can also not. Let's just be quiet for 5 seconds. I need to check what it.
And then, that'd be slowing everybody else down, basically. So we decided it's best to cut our losses here, just integrate this stuff with the LEP, and might not, but the theory didn't really match up to the.
It sounds good to me. It's like if you guys are still getting quiet audio, try boosting your settings. I might do some more audio equalizing for next stream. Mustard Bottle asks this, Gabriel. Is there any way for 4 nations to interact with China, basically seizing land or helping various warlords?
In terms of just interaction in general, absolutely. Japan is really chief among those.
Japan has a big role in the north.
Yeah, but there's also Germany in a very big way. The Germans are interested in using China as kind of a bulwark against Japan, because Germany has substantial interests economically in China and also in Southeast Asia, especially with oil. But as for actually taking land, the only people really interested in that are the Japanese to any degree. And the simple reason is that it's more profitable to have puppets in China than it is to control the country directly. It's a massive country. People were growing increasingly nationalistic. And I mean, if you look at actual history, it was around this time that most of the European powers had come to the conclusion that they couldn't really afford to keep these concessions and possessions in China for a whole lot longer. So that is a conclusion that in the cut.
Yeah, but like in our timeline, it's really only this is the last stage of Western imperialism in China, because I think what would be really interesting.
You mean after 1936?
Yeah, basically.
Potentially. The KMT definitely have an ideological advantage. And it sort of comes down to how much you believe the ideology gives them an advantage versus numbers. because the KMT do start out in kind of a weak position in sort of southeastern China, Fujian province, and the whole sort of dynamic with their tag was supposed to be you have to really win the early fights. You have to have this sort of intense struggle at the start, but once you go from there, you sort of gain momentum because you have that ideological advantage that once you sort of overcome the LEP's initial numerical advantage, then you're competing again on the national stage, and that ideological factor really is supposed to come into play. And I think we've done pretty well in that regard. The LEP, the KMT are maybe one of my favorite tags, even though I didn't actually have a massive role in designing their actual code.
Okay. So talking about tags, like what do you feel was the hardest tag to work on, Gabriel?
That's an interesting question. Maybe Sichuan, because for the record, I didn't do a lot of the physical coding for Sichuan. That was actually Alpinia, one of our newer members, who was really amazing. But I helped him a lot
for moving that China rework along.
Absolutely, yes. And Alpinia didn't have a full grasp of the lore, the history behind things. He didn't really have that much of a sort of game design background either, working on Kaiserreich. So I helped him a lot with some of the sort of ideas behind Sichuan, and the problem with it is it's an extremely divided province. We refer to it in the intro for it as kind of a microcosm of China as a whole. You've got all these different factions, and they're all super obscure. We actually had to go to the Chinese translation team, who translate Kaiserreich's content into Chinese for the Chinese audience. And they provided us with some great background and history and things that I was able to translate into Kaiserreich setting. So that was probably the hardest, just because there was so little to work with.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Sichuan province on your map here as 6 factions on the possible paths. So it's got both right and left KMT, am I seeing this? And
That's correct.
Chen Jingyongmin and Feng Tian?
Yeah, it can
and
go
5-star army.
It can go pretty much every way.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. Moving along, what's your favorite Qing path?
I mean, a certain part of me wants to say, the Manchu Restoration path, because it's just kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's what everybody sort of associates with the tag, I think.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, I kind of like the Wu Peifu paths, just because he's a really interesting character. Historically, he's a really interesting person, and I would be really curious to see what would have happened if he actually came to lead China beyond the 1920s. He was kind of a Chiang Kai-shek before his time, except he wasn't, because he lost. It could have been very interesting.
Question by Daru from the live chat. Why is it possible for the Nanjing clique to spearhead a pro-German Chinese unification if the Zili goes anti-concessionist?
Sorry, they're saying why is it, or why? Oh, why is it impossible?
Why is it impossible?
I see.
It's a double negative.
Yeah. So the trouble with the Nanjing clique, and it is something that I might try to change in the future, just so the tag has a bit more flexibility. But basically, the leader of the tag, Qi Xieyuan, if I'm pronouncing that right, is a relatively low-profile guy. Like, it's not to say that he's nobody, but him taking over China as a whole would be a little bit like General Patton taking over the United States. It's just a matter of him not having the political prestige, the connections, the political base, really, to take over the country. His rule in the League of Eight provinces is meant to be quite dependent on German assistance.
Okay. I'm just gonna answer a question by Homero real quick. Homero, our plans for year 3 and possibly year 4. So we've talked about the art book before, so that's gonna be year 3 or year 4 thing. This year we're basically focused on gathering as much art as we can, as well as if you guys go to my PDXCon talk, I won't go too deep into that here because we want to talk about China. You can see some of the plans and the roadmap laid out. I will do like a content plan at some point. Like, this is all on my to-do list. basic. So I'm going to lay out our content plan for this year as well as a rough pass at next year. But that's a rough idea of that, Homero. Pew Pew asks, this is an interesting question. Are you going to make it possible to restore the Qing 1820 borders? So he means like to re-annex Vladivostok and the surrounding, and like the sickle of Sakhalin, and the far north of the old Qing borders.
Well, to my understanding, it's more like 70 years since the starting date of Kaiserreich.
Yeah.
Because I think they were signed away in 1860.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically the Qing didn't really reclaim these areas, right?
No, and the actual, historical reveal, I should say, People's Republic of China didn't really express a whole lot of interest in controlling those areas either. The main reasons for that are basically that A, there weren't that many Chinese people there before 1860. B, there weren't that many people there after 1860 that were Chinese. And C, there wasn't a lot else there anyway. There's not a whole lot of resources there. It's a lot of sort of open expanse that the Chinese don't see a lot of benefit in.
Before Vladivostok became a big city and had a strategic importance to Russia because of its naval ports, that entire, like, Siberia is ridiculous. It's so incredibly vast and so incredibly cold in the winter and incredibly hot in the summer. It's like literally the worst place.
Yeah, and the main reason the Russians were interested in Vladivostok was that it was a warm water port, or relatively warm water anyway.
I just dropped my pen.
But being a relatively warm water port, that meant that they could actually, project power in the Pacific to some degree, at least in the Sea of Japan. China doesn't have that problem. It's got plenty of warm water ports, so there's no real benefit in having Vladivostok and entering a potentially massive, very lengthy, very expensive war with Russia.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Russia would much rather have a short and extremely expensive war with Japan instead.
Yeah.
That shade. Let's see how much. So Rammer Jammer asks, how did Li Zhongren and the rest of the right-wing KMT survive in Yunnan for so long? So why are those guys still around?
So basically, the head of Yunnan province, the main warlord there, Tang Jiao. Again, assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly, because I don't know the tones and so forth. He basically had a vested interest in keeping the KMT around because even though he technically recognized the restoration of the Qing Empire and the legitimacy of the central government, all that sort of thing, the reality is, especially in Yunnan, especially in these kind of periphery provinces, people go through the motions of subservience to Beijing, but on the ground, it's a very different reality. And so basically having these KMT troops around ensures that he can stay autonomous from Beijing as much as reasonably possible. So they're basically a tool in his back pocket. He figures if he has to get rid of them, he can, but, they're better for him to have than for somebody else to have them.
Yeah. Right, so going back to our original question lists, what is your favorite or the most surprising random fact you learned while working on Attack?
That's an interesting one. There's a lot of kind of crazy facts. There's a lot of stuff about Zhang Zongchang, for instance, one of the potential rulers of Shandong. He starts out as the ruler, actually. He was just like a crazy guy. Yeah,
so
people people used to love like Sternberg and everything, but you can go to Zhang Zongchang, and he is like basically the same kind of person, except even more crazy and historically that way. Like, Sternberg was basically blown up into something that he wasn't necessarily, thanks to some historical fiction. Zhang is kind of a crazy dude. But if there's a single fact that I was to focus on, I would probably say the fact that Zhang Shuiliang, who is the son of Zhang Zuoldin, the leader of Manchuria, dated Mussolini's daughter. Just kind of totally random.
That is very random.
I don't know if it's the case, in Kaiserreich's timeline. In fact, it's probably not. But yeah, they were hanging out.
I didn't even know Mussolini had a daughter.
Yes, Edda Mussolini, I think, was her name.
Fascinating. There's a like if you start digging, you find a lot of these very surprising historical facts and like links between people in history that we don't really talk very often about because they were basically like fun little details against the background of the massive events of the 20th century. But yeah, so that's I mean, Zhang and his poems is such a weird guy, man.
Oh yeah.
Can we,
Yeah,
can we
he's-
actually,
he's
can you,
crazy.
we should, for the people who don't know about Zhang, Gabriel, I'm gonna let you do the honors to explain, like, to give you, like, the best of Zhang. This could be a segment, like, the Zhang Hour. The Madman Zhang Hour with Flamefang and Vincent. No, but can you tell us about Zhang? Well, let's indulge our guys.
Well, he was supposed to have the body of an elephant, I think it was like the brain of an ant, something of that kind is how he was described by some people, and the temper of a tiger, I think.
Yeah.
I might be misquoting there, but basically he was this really big guy. For the time in China, he was like 6'3", 4", something like that. Which,
Jesus.
again, when the average height at this
Yeah.
time in China was like 5 feet or something, he's like this massive guy. He basically drank and smoked opium all the time. He is the epitome of vice, basically.
Yeah.
He had so many prostitutes that he had a numbering system for them, and when he sort of acquired a new one, he would get them a very special bowl which would have the flag of their country on it, so he could show off all the different countries that his prostitutes in his harem were from. He took over Shandong province after the second Zhili Fangtian War in like 24, 25, around there. And basically he took the province into kind of a crazy orgy of vice and like mess. It's kind of ridiculous. But probably his most famous story while ruling there is that he was told that there was basically a big drought, and that something needed to be done about this. So he went to the local temple where there was a statue of the rain god, and he went up to the statue and sort of looked at it, and then he slapped it in the face and said, like, basically, what the hell? Where's the rain? You need to bring some rain, or I'm gonna shoot some guns at you.
Yeah, is this where he like sent the artillery?
Yes, so he had his
That was
artillery
great.
regiment go out into the fields and point their guns at the sky and
What a
fired an
guy.
artillery barrage into the air, and kept doing that until it rained. And supposedly, it rained the next day.
Imagine.
So, apparently, this was a very effective strategy. So if you're ever looking for rain, get a whole group of artillery, find a rain god, slap him in the face.
Guns blazing.
Yeah.
Ask, will there be plans for Zhang Zongchang to reunify all of China and core them through focuses, or is that too unlikely?
It's pretty unlikely.
I mean, says it was the physique of an elephant, the brain of a pig, and the temperament of a tiger.
There you go. Yes, yeah. There are some really amazing quotes about him. Go read his poems as well.
Oh yeah, we should do a reading. Can you name me one of his poems? I want to do this one. We should.
I'm gonna have to look up the actual text because I don't know them by heart. Let's see. There's a poem about bastards. There's
A poem-
praying for rain.
I think Poem About Bastards is probably his classical work. Right, guys, this was supposed to be a Q&A, but we obviously cannot leave you without reading. Where is this? The Poem About Bastards. That's right. Are these haikus? No, it's just for... Actually, I cannot read this poem without YouTube slamming this video, so I'm going to bleep myself. A Poem About Bastards by Zhang Zulin. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Zhang Zongchang. Zuolin
Yeah,
was
sorry, right.
a different
Poem
person.
About Bastards by Zhang Zongchang. You tell me to do this. He tells me to do that. You are all bastards. Go bleep your mother. That's it. That's the poem. It's for us.
Very, very, very profound.
What a genius! What a avant-garde! The man was ahead of his time. Guys, don't want to make this this Kaiserreich Café too long, so I'm gonna like start rounding off. We'll be taking a few more questions and then we'll call it a night. Or afternoon. We're all over the world. Like we've got people from China checking in, we've got people from East and West Coast. What's something you really wanted to implement, Gabriel, but couldn't?
Probably what I'm going to sort of abstract by calling the bandit tag, which basically, historically, whenever you had wide-scale disorder in China, which is a lot of the warlord era, you had bandits that were a simple fact of life, and they would basically take control of areas and behave as their own little mini warlords. And so in the collapse of the LEP, the League of Eight Provinces, we wanted to have, or to be able to represent those bandits, which could be picked up and recruited by two of the weaker factions, the KMT and the Shangqing faction, which can take over in Shandong. And so the idea is they would be able to sort of win these guys over to their side, and that way we'd add another dynamic to the conflict, and there'd be somebody else for all these people to fight, and it would make things seem even more desperate for the LEP because their soldiers would defect and turn into these bandits. The unfortunate fact is that, as is often the case, Hearts of Iron 4 doesn't really accommodate this. It's the kind of thing that might have worked very well in, say, Crusader Kings, where you can have just armies pop up that are hostile to everybody or whoever you want. But you can't really do that in Kaiserreich. Everything has a surrender limit. The troops just don't function in the right way. So we were going to have this tag with these units that would pop up during the LEP collapse that could be recruited. It just wasn't really possible for us to do.
All right. So yeah, I think with a lot of this, you want to tell as much story as you can within Kaiserreich, but you're still within the confines of the Hearts of Iron game, right? So it has to work to like there. I think there's just a lot within China as well that cannot be. I think like for example, a lot of people when we released the world map, they said, hey, the Austro-Hungarian states are like Austria-Hungary is noted as one country. Well, technically in Kaiserreich it is one country. On a world map, it would show the country as a single whole, but it's basically a loose confederation, but still nominally a single state. That's very hard to model in Hearts of Iron. So we have the system of puppets and everything.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's some things that just no matter what you do, you aren't really able to get them to line up properly.
Yeah.
The thing I tend to point to most is logistics and like railways and things.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about scale in China before. Technically speaking, it should be almost impossible for most Chinese tags to invade Mongolia very effectively, for instance, because there's just not a lot there.
Okay. Interesting.
But in Kaiserreich, because of the way Hearts of Iron 4 works, you can technically have your armies just walk across the Gobi Desert, and go halfway across the map or the China map, without any really significant issues. And China can trade with France over land. Stuff like that.
Yeah, I think Hearts of Iron was built to basically to simulate the Western Front War and the Eastern Front, like the European theater, best of all. And I think it starts to break down the further you get away from that. Especially, for example, and this has historically been a problem, island hopping, like island blockading, like all that stuff it's a vastly different style of war and of interdiction warfare, like runway cratering, how important that all was. And it's really awkward to model that in Hearts of Iron, I think.
Yes.
And that has its consequences for the way how Kaiserreich works with certain extremely granular details that are, like, for example, I would love to see a US Civil War where it's less of like the US now splits into 4 nicely like defined parts. It should be a lot more with like uprisings and civil wars are really, really messy. So there's probably will always be confined by the Hearts of Iron engine in that case, but I do feel that the Hearts of Iron engine is just a great one to build all the rich content that Kaiserreich has on those amazing focus trees, that just go on forever, all those various little options, stacking, having the eye run through them, so you get this really cool world simulation thing.
Absolutely, yeah. As much as we might complain about the engine, or even about Paradox, at the end of the day, we wouldn't be able to do any of this without them.
Yeah, I agree. Now it would be nice if they wouldn't like release launchers that would totally break everything.
That would be nice.
That would be nice. Anyway, Gabriel, I think I'm going to call it for today, and I'm going to wish everyone a very good weekend. Do a little Patreon read and everything. But before you leave, is there anything you would like to share with the community?
Oh man, put me on the spot now. Well, I hope you guys have all enjoyed the China rework, and I hope you're looking forward to some more stuff from it. We're going to have other releases coming up, which will be focused on other areas, but there will be content added to China, hopefully continually, over the next couple of releases.
I think to close off, we should read another of Zhang's poems. But first, guys, I want to do a quick, just welcoming a few new patrons. I have my little list with me while we're here. So we actually had a lot of new patrons in January and February. So I think we almost doubled our patron revenue just in the past 2 months alone. So really welcome to all our new guys: Davo, Stefan, Jill Bates, Alex. Alex, there's a part here, but I wrote it down. My handwriting is really bad. I cannot. I think it was a French last name. Colton Banks, Scoop. Man, I really need to improve my handwriting. Shovelhead, Lieutenant Shovelhead. Alright guys, so welcome to the Patreon, and I actually think we had one more patron sign up. Since then I need to check my notifications. Just a second. Who was it? Will PT22, and it was Stefan Gunnar Stefansson. So thank you guys for supporting Kaiserreich Cinema, sending us a monthly pledge. Flamefang, Gabriel, will you read us another one of Zhang's beautiful poems as we take our leave for today?
All right. Do you have any preference? Or should we
I would say give me what you've got. Dealer's choice.
Okay. Well, there's visiting Pengai Pavilion.
All right, let's do
it. What a pavilion! Place is bleeping nice. If the gods can get here, I'll take a seat too. Have a drink by the window. Sing some songs to the ocean. Play some cards. I think I'll get drunk.
The end.
The end.
That was beautiful. That was amazing, Gabriel. So we're gonna call the episode here, guys. It was really nice talking to you, seeing you all. Community, thanks for joining us. Thanks for asking Gabriel questions. I do hope to do another episode with you, Gabriel, as we do have more China content upcoming, so we can answer a little more questions then, as well as invite some of the other developers that have worked on China. Like I'd love to talk to Alpinia. We'll see what we can set up in the future. All right?
Sounds good.
I am going to take us into the ending. See you for the next one, cats.
Kaiserreich Cinema needs you. Back the attack. Share our content or dash over to our alt history webshop.